On paper, Jon Laudie's move to ZeroRez looked off-brand. He'd spent years in tech and B2C companies doing finance work. His background seemed to point toward one kind of executive career. Then he stepped into a residential services company and had to confront a question many leaders eventually face. Is your career stuck in the comfort zone? Or are you willing to test deeper waters? Jon discovered that beneath the surface differences were many of the same customer, financial, and leadership patterns. But the bigger transformation he experienced wasn't strategic. It was personal. This is Untold. Today, Jon Laudie. Welcome back to Untold, the best-kept secrets of Utah, where we go past the headlines to the real stories behind Utah's business leaders. Today, I'm joined by Jon Laudie, President and CFO of ZeroRez. Jon spent over a decade in finance at companies like Netflix and Ancestry before making a move that, on paper, didn't look like it fit his resume at all. Today, we're getting into what that move asked of Jon and why the things we think might define us might not be the ones that actually do. Jon, welcome to Untold.
Hey, thanks. Great to be here.
Yeah, glad you're here today. When we first met and did our intro call, you said something about ZeroRez, about initially it felt like it was kind of off-brand for you. What did that sound like for you at the time when you were thinking it was off-brand? What was it about it that didn't fit?
Yeah, look, I think I had spent most of my career to date just focused on a little bit more of the technology side, software, consumer technology. Started my career out in Silicon Valley and then went through these consumer tech companies in corporate finance roles, and transitioning to what I at the time thought, oh, this is a carpet cleaning company. We are a home services company, but it was a transition away from what I thought I had always been doing and what I felt like my career had been built around. Just as we talked about that the other day, it has come into focus for me over the last few years, really, that like what we're doing here at ZeroRez every single day is so similar to what we were doing at 1-800-CONTACTS when I was there, what we were doing at Ancestry when I was there, which is really, we're engaging with consumers, we're bringing a service to them, we're bringing value to their lives. And I think one of my favorite things about ZeroRez is just that we're elevating people's livelihood. We go into people's homes, into their intimate spaces every single day, and we make their life better by leaving a clean and a healthy place for them to be, and their families to be, and their children to be. And I think that meaning and that connection to what we bring to our consumers, to our customers, and our raving fans is just, it's not too dissimilar from any other widget that might get sold to a consumer. Really, we're a consumer focused. We're acquiring customers in a lot of the same channels. We're a consumer focused service business. And I quickly learned after getting into this business, my goodness, it's a little different. We're doing franchising. We're selling a different widget, but we're really talking to people and helping elevate their lives. And I think that means something. And it's actually not too dissimilar from so many other companies and industries that sort of accomplish the same thing.
Was there a moment when that realization of the commonalities between your past experience and ZeroRez, when that kind of came to light?
Probably. I think it was when I first started and we dug into some of the data behind the business, and we were creating cohort analyses to look at our customer behavior over time, and we were looking at marketing acquisition funnels and attribution for marketing efficiency. And after the first couple of weeks on the job and digging into that kind of detail and that kind of information, I realized, okay, we're doing the same thing here. It's a little different. Some of the KPIs look a little different. But we are ultimately running a very similar business model behind the scenes, and it made me feel a lot more comfortable and confident that okay, I know what I can do here to add some value, and I know where I can dig in.
Okay. Before you had that realization, was that situation where you thought maybe it wasn't, that it was different? Was that limiting you somehow as a leader?
I think I probably had a little bit of imposter syndrome. Like maybe I'm not going to be as effective in this role because this is a departure from the business model I'm used to. And yeah, I think in some ways that probably limited me early on. And then there's some confidence in coming back to, oh wait, no, this is familiar to me, or here's how I'm connecting the new to what the old was, and the familiarity there certainly brought me more confidence.
Hmm. Yeah. What other advantages came to light after you saw that the similarities between your past experience and this one?
I think it became easier for me to think about, okay, how do I need to structure my observations and my understanding of the business? I stepped in as a CFO here and had the opportunity to really build a program from scratch. I mean, we when I came into the business, it was a franchise business. We had a couple of cities that we owned and operated, and we were primarily a franchisor supporting our franchise system. And very quickly, right after I started, we did a very large acquisition, and we brought in our outside first institutional investment into the company, and then acquired really concurrently like 10 other companies all at once. And so I think that the ability for me to get to a place where I had confidence in how to add value to not only our franchise partners, but to our internal operators who were running these new cities we had just acquired. It was important that I could get to a place where I could have some commonality and have some understanding of where I could add value. And I think day one, I felt like, I don't know how I'm going to actually add value here. And now I'm going to have to spend a lot of time learning. And I did. I'm still learning every day. I have had to spend a lot of time learning this industry and this business. But there were some immediate things that I was able to apply that crossed industries and that crossed that span, like we've been talking about, that I think allowed me to add value right away to some of those partners, again, outside as franchise partners that we have in our system, as well as the internal operators that we had acquired, who were now kind of running as part of our entity with us.
Hmm. That's great. And you mentioned that you came in as CFO, and now you've taken on also the president role. So again, kind of a step away from maybe what felt familiar into something new. Um, so did that first change, that first shift from realizing you were a little bit siloed or narrow about your definition, did that help you with the second one?
Yeah, I think so. And when I took, I think it sort of naturally morphed as we so, you can imagine going through 10 acquisitions concurrently and sort of reinventing the entire infrastructure and building an accounting team. And there's a great accountant here who had been keeping the lights on and running the show before I joined, and working with her to then build out the team for the go forward and the new normal. Um, I think the CFO role was all about building and evolution and creating an organization that could scale. And that naturally led itself to a place where I had my hands in a lot more than just the accounting and the finance of the business, but the operations and the sales motion and the marketing efficiency, and really thinking holistically about the business. And as I did that, it sort of, we were a lean team, and it gave me the opportunity to put my head in places where maybe, I wouldn't have had that opportunity at other places because someone else was leading that or thinking about it. And as I did that, I got some exposure cross functionally that after a couple of years, it just made all the sense in the world for me to lean in more aggressively into some of those areas, and which naturally then this president opportunity came along to step up and more formally take some ownership and leadership over those functions as well. And I think that again, the journey of confidence and early days, how do I add value, and finding commonalities across industries and across companies, uh, all really helped me dig my way into areas of the business that gave me exposure and context that have allowed me to hopefully be successful in what I'm doing now and in a little bit more broad of a role. So stepping out of just the
Okay.
CFO corner and thinking a little bit more holistically, I think it's been a good thing for me. I've learned a ton, I've grown a ton, but I do think it was born out of having to dig in to so many unique small things and again get that confidence early on to allow me to touch other areas of the business.
Okay. Okay. Um, what's one area of your new responsibilities as president that the CFO experiences didn't really prepare you for? Something new you had to learn.
Yeah. I think there are so many of those things. But I think I thought I understood more than I did before I started having direct responsibility over certain things. I'll give an example. Our technicians are the best. They're the best in the business, and they go out and they go into people's homes every single day. As a finance person and a CFO, I spent less time thinking about the actual customer experience in a home and the way somebody is engaged with and talked to. Generally the operations team is thinking about, okay, how does someone show up to the door and what do they say and what do they hand to the customer when they walk in and how do they add value in that experience with the customer. Um, I think the traditional finance seat doesn't prepare you for that as well as actually being out there and doing it. And so I was not prepared for how to support and help our local field operations people and our technicians in the problems they interact or come into every single day. The way I've been able to work through that is actually spending time getting out on trucks and going and spending time with our field ops people and learning and experiencing what happens when a machine shuts off at 4 p.m. and you have one room left to clean and your truck just dies and now how do we solve that problem and those operational things I don't think I was really equipped for or prepared for. And now I'm able to sort of bring that full circle back to connect that to the financial picture and try and make the experience better for our employees and our customers kind of through that holistic view.
How has that experience you just described, how has that changed how you develop people within the organization?
Oh, man, I think this might be one of the areas where I've evolved the most in my thinking in the last 5 years. Um, I feel like the most important thing that we can do in our organizations is build those around us and see people for people, um, and really focus on understanding and believing and being there for the development of those that we're working with every single day. Um, we're working on on the side. I'm working on a book project with some co-authors, and we're actually releasing that book soon called Roots, Relationships, and Results. And it's a leadership book. And a couple of co-authors that I'm partnered with on that who are so, great at this, and they have been so great to learn from. We did this research project and we interviewed over 100 senior leaders and CEOs, professional athletes, politicians, like kind of the whole spectrum of industry, people coming late into come into the later stages of their career who've by all, by all measures been successful, define success however you will, and asking this question about what is the most important leadership lesson you've learned and how would you convey that lesson to your children if you were kind of giving them the last lecture of your life, which is here's what matters in leadership. Take this with you through your career. And I'm in a roundabout way answering your question because one of the people we talked to talked about this concept of everybody you interact with at work is going through something, and you don't know what it is, but everyone's experiencing something. Um, he himself is dealing with Parkinson's and is kind of late in his career and now in the later stages of his life. And looking back, he said, "Look, I've been dealing with this personal thing, which has immensely changed the way I now view others that I engage with at work, at home, in my community, in my church, whatever that might be." And he said if he could teach the most important thing to his kids, It's that you need to figure that out earlier. You need to understand that and internalize that everybody you're engaging with is going through something crazy and chaotic at some point in their life. It might be a health thing. It might be a thing with their parents. It might be a thing, with a family member, a child, or whatever it might be. And having that level of empathy and understanding just changes the way you engage with people, and it changes the way you invest in people. It changes the way you interact with people. And so I think that is what I come back to as the thing that's perhaps most important that shifted in me the last 5 years, is changing my perspective from here's what the business metric says, here's what the answer is in a model, here's what the piece of paper says we should do, and here's why we're losing or whatever, to yes, all of that matters, and the people that go and actually execute the changes in the business matter tenfold. And it's understanding, how do I engage? We're all humans having a human experience, and how do I engage those people to solve those problems that the model spits out? And again, like growing up in the finance world, building a financial model is the solution to all of life's problems, and that's not true at all. But rather, I think building people around a common goal with a common vision and understanding the nuances of people's individual personal lives. We're all humans having this human experience together. And I think it just breaks down barriers and allows people to get united on a common purpose.
That's great. I've known a lot of CFOs, and giving up the numbers or putting those numbers second is difficult. I mean, it's a big change, and putting people first. Was there anything beyond the this interview that made that real for you? Because it seems like that's a fundamental shift, of paradigm shift for a lot of people. Was there a moment that brought that home to you and really made it matter?
Thinking aloud about what that might be, I think there have been times, and I've seen this perhaps more in my current role than I ever have in other times in my career. There have been times where, we're not performing the way we need to, or where things feel chaotic or things feel disorganized. And we're focused on a KPI and we're not winning on that KPI, and you lose sight of everything else. And so as I've seen and looked at, our CEO here is someone I respect immensely, and is a mentor to me here at ZeroRez. The way he's able to bring people together to a common kind of vision, and elevate them out of the day to day kind of chaos and disorganized, whatever it might be, um, really has a powerful effect on morale, culture, and the ability to go and win. And so I'm not pointing to a specific example, other than I've probably seen that happen here countless times in the last 5 years, and I've learned from that, and now try to kind of mirror that in the way that I lead. Is it is his example of bringing people to that common vision and getting out of kind of the disorganized chaos of the day to day that everybody experiences, to see the bigger picture of here's where we're going. We're still very much on track. Rewind 4 years ago and look at where we were, look at where we are today. And now let's have a vision of where we're going to be 4 years from now, and not let the day to day just consume all that anyone's able to think about. It has been powerful to watch that change people in our current workplace. And I think that might be the example that comes to mind right away.
Well, that's excellent. Okay. So you've seen it over and over, how that type of message, or going beyond the numbers, is impacting people. And that's cool. Kind of soaked into you by osmosis.
Totally.
Okay. I'm curious. That book, it sounds like that process was a really rich experience to hear what people have accumulated over their lifetime. Any other messages that stand out for you that you think might be something that you come back to at the right moment?
Yeah, I think so. There's one key theme that sort of emerged. I mean, as we talked to all these people and interviewed them, all of the themes sort of coalesced around a couple of, we kind of went into this with a hypothesis, like there might be a few key themes that emerge, and maybe it's 3 or 4 or 5. And we sort of had a preconceived idea of what those might be. And we were right in some cases, and in some cases completely wrong. And it became interesting because it wasn't 3 or 4 or 5. It actually turned into like 11 or 11 or 12, which feels like a lot and maybe not manageable. But after we got through about 50 of these interviews, then the next sort of 50 plus all sort of fit back into one of these core things, which was really fascinating. And if we looked at all of those 11 or 12 kind of core principles or attributes, if you will, they really fit into one of 3 buckets, which was your roots or your inner work, the concept of the ordered life. Like first you have to gain order over yourself before you can have influence over others. Then this concept of the relationships and the interpersonal connectivity of how you can empower each other through these powerful relationships, and then the results, which ultimately come at the end. And there was a lot of kind of concept around how small wins can stack and compound into big wins, and how that is a powerful way for leaders to kind of compel their teams is through stacking these small wins, and also ultimately leadership beyond the title, which is, I move out of the CEO seat at some point, and what does that look like, and how am I contributing, and what does my contribution look like at that stage when I'm no longer holding a title. It was so fascinating to see those all come together. It almost turned into this life cycle or this arc of leadership where you sort of start internally, and then it moves externally, and then it moves to kind of this contribution that is beyond both your interpersonal and your inner work that you're doing, and driving those results. And so, one theme that really maybe that stood out more than any of them, and we had a couple of great interviews on this that boiled down to this chapter about trust and sort of the table stakes. We had a conversation with Stephen M. R. Covey, who is, this world-renowned author and leader. And he talked about being trustworthy is like table stakes. And he's written a book called The Speed of Trust. It's all about, trustworthiness. And he said, but that's not enough. That's just table stakes. Where it really goes from there, and what matters the most beyond that is just being trusting. Like it's not enough to just be trustworthy. You have to be trusting, which is turning that and saying, I'm now empowering and trusting those around me to deliver. And trust isn't just letting go. It's actually empowering and building and loving and all of those things that allow you to let someone else really take the reins and run. I think that fits into what we were talking about a minute ago around how do you build those people around you, and how do you, some of those things that I've seen my CEO here do, Sean, and I think that concept of I'm going to be trusting as a next level, not just trustworthy. I'm not just going to be trusted because I'm trustworthy, but I'm actually going to turn around then and become the person who's trusting. And what that means has really actually been, powerful for me. And it made me harken back to an example earlier in my career of why this resonated so much with me was because there was a moment when I was at Ancestry, and I was on the financial planning team at Ancestry, and the CFO and I were working together on a number of projects and meeting with investors, and kind of I was helping with investor relations and stuff like that at the company. Well, we were at a conference meeting with some of the folks that were invested in our company, and I had done this kind of over and over with him multiple times, where we sit down and I've got my pencil out and I'm ready to take notes, and he's talking about the business to whoever's across the table. And at one point, he sort of totally flipped the script without saying a word to me. The investor comes in, sits down, we'll all say hi and whatever, and then I kind of sit back ready to go. And the CFO of the company, the first question comes to the CFO, and he sort of just sits there and doesn't answer the question. And I'm kind of like looking at my paper, and I look up like, this is weird, just silent. What happened? And he was looking at me, and just like waiting for me to respond. And he hadn't told me, hey, I'm gonna have you kind of engage with these guys. I'm there. I thought I was there to hand the numbers across or like help him, with whatever data he might need or whatever. But he sort of stopped, turned, and just waited for me to answer. And in that moment, it was this moment of like him extending trust and being trusting. And it was this moment of him really stretching me and pushing me to do something different. And honestly, I was terrified, but it was amazing how quickly I knew exactly what to say. I probably screwed up plenty of things, but I knew what to say. I knew where to go. I knew the answers, and I ended up leading the majority of that whole meeting. And afterwards, he kind of laughed after they walked out of the room, and he said, like, you need to stop sitting back and just waiting. You need to step up. You have some confidence in yourself. You know what you're doing. You know what to say. Stop being so deferential and waiting for other people to lead. Like, you can do this. You can lead, and you can engage, and you need to. And it was a great like kick in the butt for me at the time.
Mhm.
And it was this example of extending trust. And so as we talked to Stephen M. R. Covey, and he talked about trusting being what really is empowering for those around you when you're a leader. And then I lived into or had this memory of this experience. Like, this actually really changed my perspective on everything about my career. And really, I would call it a catalyzing moment for me where everything changed. And I started taking a seat at the table in different ways that impacted my career growth and my influence and all the things. And that theme really resonates with me. And it was so fun to interview CEOs who talked about that with 15 different stories of that same experience, them receiving it or giving it. And it was fascinating for me.
Mhm. What a great experience. Yeah, I'm wondering too, because so much of this experience is also gained through making mistakes, like Stephen Covey realizing being trustworthy isn't enough, right? That won't get you there. You have to actually extend the trust to get the trust in return. Did any of the stories make you look back and say, "Oh man, I had that wrong"? And change your perspective or maybe bring new regrets or whatever. Maybe I didn't learn this fast enough, or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was a member of a choir in college. I went to BYU. I was a member of the BYU men's chorus and loved that experience for a couple of years. And there was this motto on the crest that we all, there was like a jacket, it was like your badge of honor when you were in the men's chorus, and it had a little crest that you would wear on there, and it had a Latin phrase, esse quam videri, and that means to be rather than to seem. And so I think that's changed now, by the way. I don't think they do that anymore. I think it's now something different. But um, that phrase, and I don't think it meant as much to me at the time as it does now. And now I think, looking back, I look through the early years of my career. I look through even the mid kind of, the years after I was brand new, and I was thinking all that mattered was showing up, outworking everybody, seeming like I was busy, always seeming like I had it all together. And I truly think that I did a massive disservice to those I worked with by doing that. I know that I did a massive disservice to my family and my loved ones and myself by doing that. And ultimately, this whole idea of being rather than seeming, um, I don't even know that I've figured it out yet, but I know that it means more to me now than it did ever when I was in college. And I know that if I live into that now, it changes everything about the way I show up at work and the way I show up with those, that I interact with every single day. Um, so yes, I think regrets for me early on were focusing too much on seeming like I had it all together, seeming like I was busy, seeming like I had all the answers, instead of being and acknowledging and accepting where my weaknesses were and where my growth could be, because I know I was a drag on teams when I would do that, because it would get us in trouble over and over again. I can think of specific models that I built for where there were massive issues because I was just moving so quickly and so confident, or focused on making sure nobody could see the error I had made. And it's like that was completely counterintuitive and just put a drag on everything that we were trying to accomplish. And so I try and approach things a little bit more authentically now in that regard with I here is where I am weak and here is where I am strong. And I know I add value in the areas I'm strong, and I know I need other people to help me in the areas where I'm weak. And I think when I approach my work that way, it allows others to approach their work that way. And we get to kind of support each other and fill in for those areas where we know that there's weakness.
Mm. Wow. That's profound. You might have already given me the answer to this, but I want to check because I want to turn the tables on you and ask you the question you asked in the book. Right. So what is the biggest thing that you've learned about leadership that you would pass on to your kids or to somebody who's starting their career? What's the most important thing that you would tell them?
I think it's probably what we just talked about. And that I'm pretty passionate about that right now because I'm having a bit of this, personal evolution the last 2 to 3 years where I'm feeling like I see it, I get it, I see it in a new way now. And the thing that I would portray as my last lesson to my children at the end of my career about here's what really mattered. It's that people are people, and we need to be okay with imperfection. We need to be okay with showing up, not having it all together. We need to be okay accepting and understanding that those around us also don't have it all together and might be going through who knows what horrible thing in their personal lives that you're not seeing or you're not privy to. And having that space and that empathy for those around you to not be perfect all the time changes the way you approach any project at work, the way you approach any team, the way you approach any family member, the way you approach any friend, because it leaves space for those around you to fill and for you to kind of fill space for them as well. And that to me is, it's funny that these conversations that we had for the book they didn't all coalesce around that. Many did, and many had other parts which we talk about in the book, but those ones resonated the most with me and just sort of like clicked that light on around, this is the one for me right now. And I actually think that might evolve and change over time, but like right now, this is the one for me.
Fantastic. That's a real observation. I can tell, I can feel your passion around it. And just want to really thank you for your honesty. I know that somebody will get what they need to hear from this episode. Untold is about, the whole reason for the podcast is to inspire the next generation of business leaders and entrepreneurs. And so many lessons in this that you've shared with us today. So thank you, Jon Laudie, for being with us today on Untold.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. It was really great to chat.
Loved it. Thanks, Jon.